Hello, everyone. This is Jeff Siegel, and welcome to Commit to Sit, the 31-day meditation journey. So what I'd like to do is begin by just taking a breath together. So on the count of 3, we're going to breathe in. Ready? 1, 2, 3. And let it all go. So in this introduction audio, what I'd like to do is lay out some important foundational concepts that I think are going to be helpful in your meditation journey, as well as demystify some meditation myths, and then go over some potential challenges and pitfalls that may arise during your practice. So to begin, right, over the next 31 days, we'll be practicing different types of meditations. My goal was to keep the practices short to around 10 minutes or less so that you could really insert them into your days and you could really begin to integrate and practice these things, not just in your designated sitting time, but as you go throughout your day, right? And this integration piece is really key and is really one of the most challenging parts. I also want to, right off the bat, dispel the myth that there is one right way to meditate. So don't get overly caught up in feeling like you need to look a certain way or assume a particular, posture or have the right sort of bells with you. I do highly recommend that you download the interval timer app and use that to help time your meditations or just have the timer available on your phone. I also want to say that I recognize that each of you are here for different reasons, right? And you're all on your own journey and at different starting places, right? And what you're going to get out of these practices varies tremendously depending on what your goals are for signing up for this challenge, right? What your intentions are for practicing. And for, a lot of us, it might just be to improve our concentration, right? And our ability to focus. It might be to learn to relax and listen to what's going on in our bodies, in our hearts, and take better care of ourselves, right? It might be to connect with some deeper purpose in life, to connect with something larger than ourselves. It might be to generate feelings of kindness, of warmth, to help, reduce suffering in ourselves and in the world. Whatever it is that's driving you towards these practices, I would just take a moment right now, think about it. If you have a pen or pad or a little note that you can open up, write it down, right? What is that big motivator for why you believe that learning to meditate and committing to trying these practices for the next month is going to really be helpful for you? So a quick analogy about meditation that, I think is often really helpful, right? And for those of you who know me know that I'm a big fitness guy, right? I love exercise. I love working out. I love, bodies in motion as much as bodies at rest, right? And think about, just as you can train and strengthen your body, you can train and strengthen your mind. Now in fitness, this training is about moving your body, right, against resistance, against inertia. In meditation, we're working against a different type of inertia, right? And this is the inertia of the habit energy of our bodies, the habits of our feelings, the habits of our thoughts. Right? And these aspects of our lives have inertia in the sense that it's easier to continue thinking the same thoughts than it is to think a different thought, right? It's easier to keep repeating the same behaviors than it is to change and do a new behavior. And this is grounded in our biological wiring, that it's simply easier to reactivate established neural networks than it is to create new ones. So we end up following the path of least resistance and doing what we've always done. The beautiful part is that meditation can help disrupt that process. It can help us shift from living habitually to living intentionally. And as the famous Viktor Frankl quote says, one of the most powerful things that we all have is the ability to insert a space between stimulus and response. right? And it is in that space, all right, that we have the power to choose how we respond. And it is in our response where our growth and our freedom lie. So just taking a moment to think about that. Right? How can we respond without reacting? How can we create space around what's going on? Right? How does that space, right, that awareness then give us power to choose how we act? Right? With that power also comes responsibility. And how does meditation actually do this? Well, there's one very important concept that I feel is foundational for understanding how meditation can really help you grow and develop. And for me, I see this, my meditation practice very much as a tool for psychospiritual growth. And one key behind that is what we like to call the subject-object shift. Now, the subject-object shift is a kind of conceptual roadmap for how consciousness grows, right? It's the process of when your awareness both transcends and includes everything that you were previously subject to. And I know this language might be a little new or different. What does it mean to be subject to something, right? Things that you are subject to, right, you can't see because they're part of you. Right? They are the lens in which you are viewing the world, right? And because they can't be seen, right, they're taken for granted. They are assumed to be true, right? You can't name them, you can't reflect upon them, right? And so we are all subject to something, right? This includes our personality traits, our assumptions about the way the world works, lots of our behaviors and our emotions. And so what we're subject to is this unique lens of awareness, right? That really just colors and forms our perception of the world. So what is the subject-object shift? Well, it's when we grow our awareness to take something that we were initially subject to, right? And we move it into the object phase, right? And when we're subject to something, it's basically saying, I am this thing. When we are object to something, it's saying, I am experiencing, or I have this thing. Right? So things that we are object to, right, are those things that we can know, we can reflect upon, we can handle, we can look at, and therefore we can be responsible for, right? We can take control of or act upon. Right? There's this detachment of who we are from these concepts and objects that we can look at and engage with. And Dan Siegel, seems like a wonderful guy, no relation, has a wonderful image called the Wheel of Awareness. And in that image, he lays out, the hub, which is what we are subject to, and the rim, which is what we are object to. And on that rim, right, he lists out all the different things, like what can we actually be object to in our experience, right? We can be object to the senses, right? Our sight of, sight, touch, sound, smell, right? All of these can be parts of our awareness, right? We can be object to the interior of our bodies, right? Physical pain, tension in our muscles, functioning of our organs. We can be object to mental activities, right? Thoughts, emotions, beliefs, right? And this is what a lot of meditation tends to hone in on, is this idea that we can think about thinking itself, right? We can, gain this meta-awareness of that mental activity, right? And we can also be object to interpersonal things, right? Relationships, community, nature, right? We can know that feeling of trust or mistrust between another person, or the feeling of connection or disconnection, right? And so think about, not all knowing, not all objects of awareness have to be known strictly through thinking, strictly through kind of cognitive and linguistic means, right? There are many ways you can know something. For instance, right now, right, you know that you have a shirt on. You can feel it on your body. You don't actually have to put it into any real language to know that it's there, right? And so what we're doing is we're also exploring the different ways of knowing in the world, and the different ways of coming to understand, our experience, and really trying to broaden to this full spectrum of human experience, because we often really just get sucked in to this very narrow and limited, thought-based perspective. And so this subject-object shift is really key to all meditation practices and is the link into how these things play into our overall development and growth. I strongly recommend looking into the work of Robert Kegan. This subject-object shift is part of his constructive developmental framework. And he has a great book called In Over Our Heads, in which he goes really in depth into some of these frameworks. So think about it, meditation, right, is this practice of zooming out, right, taking a meta perspective of our experience in the moment, right, creating this gap between subject and object, right? And when we do that, we practice putting our awareness into this witnessing mode, into this observing mode, where we can see all these different aspects of our experiences without necessarily becoming them, without necessarily being swept away by them, right? So we can have a thought without the thought having us. We can have a feeling without the feeling having us, right? We can say, right, I'm experiencing anger, right? Or I notice anger rising, or I'm having a really angry moment, right? Or I notice this tension in my belly and my jaw clenching, right? Versus just saying, I'm angry, and then everything that I do is emanating, right, from that subjective experience of anger. So the challenge is maintaining that subject-object gap, because our minds tend to kind of cling onto every passing thought and sensation. We collapse back into that subjectivity, right? And so what we need to do is we need to practice. And this is where we start with small little practices that we train our attention to stay put. We put our attention on one object or anchor, typically the breath. And then we know very directly when we've lost our ability to witness that anchor, we've lost that objectivity, right? We've collapsed back down. We need to open up that subject-object gap. And so that's that moment of consciously broadening, picking back up our attention, redirecting it over and over again. And we'll get into this in more detail as we go through the different meditations, right? And each meditation does kind of stand alone. However, it's designed in a way that we're going to be building day to day, week to week on these little frameworks. So I do really recommend that you progress every single day. And this is part of the challenge of, can you show up every day to do these practices? So a few disclaimers or considerations that I think are really important to put out there before we begin. One is that these practices can bring up uncomfortable feelings. And when layered on top of existing trauma or chronic pain, right, this can really be frightening or even psychologically dysregulating. So please don't feel like you have to close your eyes or sit in a certain way. And first and foremost, always, 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 just do what is going to be best for you to take care of yourself. Right? Another thing to consider for myself and for these teachings is intersectionality, right? All the different ways that my, implicit biases and culture as a white, English-speaking, cisgendered male of a certain socioeconomic class, right, and all these other identities that I hold are just going to inform the way that I approach this material, inform the way that I present it and that I teach it. And I want to be aware that this might not translate well to your unique perspective, to your background, to your culture. And so if that is true, my hope is that there are some things here that are certainly helpful for you. But I just ask that you figure out what is helpful. And I want to apologize for any blind sights or things that I have omitted or missed in my teachings. And I also want to say that, everything I'm offering right now is true as I know it to be in this moment. But it is also partial. It is also incomplete, right? And as I learn and grow and discover more, I may realize that some of these ideas are really off base, if not entirely, misleading. So I also want to apologize ahead of time, right? And say that I hope this is helpful for you in taking the next step in your journey, right? And remember, there are many different ways that you can approach these practices, and they can go really deep, and they can help transform you and your world in really profound ways. So what we're going to begin to do is just sort of the tip of the iceberg, but I hope that if anything, this just plants a seed for you to recognize the importance of taking some time in your day to slow down, to reflect, to sit in purposeful silence, to get quiet, to notice what's going on with you, to return back to that world within, and to connect with that bigger world outside of us, right? And the ways in which you do that are going to change, and I hope that you find the way that's going to work best for you. And for the next 31 days, what I'd like to do is offer you some little tools in your toolkit that you can begin to play around with in your life. And I'm really excited to be here with you. And at this point, it's time for us to begin. So progress to the next audio, and we will do practice for day 1. Thank you again, Jeff Siegel. Commit to sit.